We're here in our potted history workshop in Rothbury, and we're preparing for a firing of the replica kiln at Vindolanda Roman fort. The kiln was built in 2017 and we've fired it about a dozen times since then, trying to achieve various different types of Roman pottery. On this occasion we're going to fire it for black burnished ware, black pottery. It's just been repaired. We've made some alterations to it, so this is really going to be the first firing of the kiln in its new state. It's small. The chamber's only about 70 centimetres across and about 70 centimetres deep, which sounds tiny. But we've actually, on the shelves here, we've got 106 pots that we're reckoning we should be able to get into that kiln without too much trouble. So while it's small, it produces a lot of pots. And I think most Roman sort of provincial potters would have been working with a kiln like this and producing the sort of stuff that people were needing for everyday use and producing lots and lots of it. If you're sitting or working at a wheel every day, you can knock out 100 cooking pots a day. You've got to be able to fire those. So these kilns probably would have been in use fairly constantly. It may have been that potters were moving from place to place and doing different things, supplying different venues along Hadrian's Wall, for instance. But at the same time, at each venue, I think they would have been there for some time and produced quite a lot of pots. So we've been making these pots. Cooking pots with their typical crisscross lattice pattern on them. They're burnished top and bottom. Now, by burnished, I mean I've thrown the pot on the wheel, allowed it to dry to about sort of leather hard, and at that point, it's gone back on the wheel upside down, been trimmed, and then using a smooth, in this case, metal tool, but it can be a bone tool, antler, nicely polished stones work great. You work over the surface so as you smooth down the surface. It pushes any grit or any sand down into the clay and leaves you just with a fine clay surface. I've left a band unburnished and done the crisscrossing on that just with a fine, actually point of an antler, backwards and forwards across there to produce nice burnished pots. Those were seem to have been the sort of standard cooking pot in houses all around Roman Britain. We've used them. They're fantastic cooking pots. They don't take much heat to get them going and they boil away nicely, produce a really tasty stew, really good stuff. And in fact, last time we fired the kiln, we had supper out of one of those. We've done some little tiny ones as well. There's a London cremation burial of a child that had one of these tiny little cooking pots. And again, we don't know whether it was their toy, whether it was their last meal, whatever it was. Indented beakers, they're going in. A very common find along the wall. Basically has a handle on every side, no matter which way you turn it round, so it doesn't matter how many of them you've drunk, you can still find the handle, very useful. Those are going to actually go inside the cooking pots because you want to try and occupy every bit of space you possibly can. In getting these pots black, we're going to starve the kiln of oxygen towards the end. That means we're going to overstoke it. There's going to be a lot of extra carbon goes into the kiln. A lot of that carbon is going to get trapped in the pots. It's also going to change the iron that's in the clay. The clay's brown because it's got iron oxide in it. Give it lots of oxygen when you're firing it, it goes orange. Starve it of oxygen, it goes grey. The grey clay combined with the black carbon in there will give us black cooking pots. But in order to get that, we want the maximum density of stuff in the kiln that we can. We don't want any spaces for air, really, if we can help it. Obviously, the flame has to have some air as it goes through, but we want that to be minimal. So every space that we can get will be filled. It's also economically better, more viable, isn't it? You know, if you're producing pots to sell and you want to make money, you want to be able to get as many pots in that kiln as you can. So we've got, as I say, 106 pots, cooking pots. We've also got head pots. Sarah's been busy doing these faces on face pots, copying Roman designs. So we've got sort of male ones and possibly female ones, maybe. but certainly different styles. Ones where the pot itself is actually modelled to shape the face, and ones where the face is applied onto the surface of the pot. These are fairly common, and if you're following my video course, you'll have seen me recently making both types of pot and demonstrating how that was done. One vessel that's going to go in there, or a couple of them, are these, and they're quite an odd pot. They do turn up on Roman sites around Roman Britain. They're known as a castor box. Box? Well, maybe, possibly. They have been described as soup tureens. Don't really see that myself. I think it's probably down to the fact that there's an element of the tagine in there, possibly. That's maybe why that's been given to them. They are made in a very different way to a lot of pots, and I will show you how those are made in another time, but effectively they're made as a single vessel that's cut in half. Very strange. And decorated on the surface with chatter decoration, and again, I'll show you that on another occasion, where you're using a blade to actually produce a chatter pattern on the surface. Again, nice black pots, we hope. So, last one. We've got a couple of big head pots going in there. They will go down the centre of the pack. When we pack the kiln, it's packed from the top, open cylinder. You'll get to see this, I'm sure, on our video of the actual firing. But what you need is something to support a temporary arch over the top, and we tend to use very big, hefty, chunky pots to do that. So those, a stack of those will go down the middle of the kiln to support that arch. We will be packing that kiln on Friday, so these have got a couple of days to dry, and they do need to be completely dry. When we put pots in the kiln, they have to be absolutely dry, no moisture in there at all. If there's moisture in the clay, if we heat it too fast, it's going to blow, so these need to be completely dry. So we've got these over a heat source, as I'm sure many Roman workshops would have had, probably a charcoal fire with shelving above in order to dry pots out. We're going to pack it on Friday, probably Friday evening, possibly Saturday morning if we think it's too damp on Friday evening, and fire probably for about 8 hours on Friday, up on Saturday up to about 850 degrees centigrade, then starve oxygen, and on Monday we'll find out whether we were successful or not.